New Year's is always a time of contrasts, of extremes, old and new, loud and soft, light and dark. It's a time for looking back at where we've been and looking forward to where we're going. And for one group of hardy mountain climbers, New Year's every year is their link with the ages-old heritage of Pikes Peak. For on New Year's Eve, the summit of Pikes Peak belongs to the AdAmAn Club. Every year about Thanksgiving time, Darrell Hickey of Black Forest begins looking towards Pikes Peak with a special affection. When he's not teaching history in School District number 38 or teaching a novice pilot how to fly over the plains and mountains of Colorado, Darrell Hickey is getting mentally and physically prepared to do what most sensible people would call foolish, if not downright dangerous: climb Pikes Peak in the windy cold of winter.
If it's impossible, we don't have to run this week.
John Graham, who runs the weekly Pikes Peak Journal in Manitou, is also getting excited about the climb. Not that it will be any tougher than similar climbs he's made to the top of Pikes Peak, or any other of Colorado's 14ers, but on this climb, John Graham will celebrate the beginning of a new year with his wife, Sue, on the summit of Pikes Peak, a first for both of them.
No, he wanted you to have this in your hands.
Oh, I see.
Dr. Robert Stafford of Colorado Springs has an added responsibility this year, beyond his patients and family. He'll climb Pikes Peak with Hickey and Graham, but he'll also see that the almost 30 others make it to the summit safely as well. And if the weather is good, Dr. Stafford can rejoice with thousands of people all over Colorado as he and the AdAmAn Club bring in the new year with a bang. The AdAmAn Club has a single, simple purpose: to climb Pikes Peak as a group on New Year's Eve and set off a fireworks display from the summit that can be seen for over 100 miles away. No great social cause, no big fundraising effort, just a climb and fireworks show. The night before the two-day climb is to begin, all the climbers gather to go over last-minute problems and details.
I would like to remind everybody that it's not an athletic competition. Nobody's going to win by getting on top first. We aren't really up until the last guy's up.
Let's not have anybody hurt on the hike, and let's not have anybody hurt firing the fireworks. We can move along, and as Bob says, I think these salvos are fine, but whenever anybody gets hyped up and starts yelling, let's go, let's pull on the brakes, because we're at a high altitude, we're tired, and let's not make any mistakes with those high explosives.
The AdAmAn Club gets together as a group really only once during the year. Several of the members are regular climbing and hiking partners, but it's only in the last 2 days of December that they hike together as a group. All the members and their invited guests are seasoned winter hikers, and all carry enough clothing and equipment to keep warm at wind chill factors of 80 degrees below zero and colder. They use words like fun, great time, and enjoyable to describe their ordeal. And literally hundreds of people annually apply to join the climb, hoping they'll be chosen to go along. Of course, you don't have to be a member of the AdAmAn Club to climb mountains in wintertime. But if you're going to be a living part of Pikes Peak heritage and tradition, the AdAmAn climb is it in wintertime. Pikes Peak is perhaps the most famous of all the mountains in Colorado. Zebulon Pike explored the Pikes Peak region in the early 1800s, and after an ill-equipped attempt to climb to the top, he declared that the peak would never be climbed. He was proven, though, to be quite wrong. Westward travelers used it as a welcoming landmark, and the phrase Pikes Peak or bust helped give thousands of people the raw determination to seek fame and fortune in the West. A cog-driven railway was completed to the summit in the 1890s, and the Pikes Peak Highway was finished in 1916. About the same time the Pikes Peak Highway was finished on the north and west sides of the mountain, another way up was being carved on the east side. Fred Barr worked in area coal mines during the winter and spent his money and time during the summer building a burro and foot trail through the forest and up the steep rock face to the summit. Friends would often come up and visit him in his cabin. Now, Fred and his friends were not the kind of folks who were bothered by a little cold and snow. And on New Year's Eve, 1922, Fred Barr and 4 others, Fred Morath, brother Ed Morath, Willis McGee, and noted photographer Harry Stanley all packed their gear for a hike up the Cog Railway to the top of Pikes Peak. They would have hiked Barr's new trail, but it wasn't yet finished. Along the way, they picked up some discarded railroad flares and added these to a few skyrockets they planned to shoot off at midnight to open the new year. Struggling through fierce winds and extreme cold, the 5 men arrived at the summit house, only to find its steel doors completely covered with snow and ice. After chopping and hacking for what seemed like hours, the climbers finally gained entrance, and soon had a warm fire roaring in the summit house pot-bellied stove. At the stroke of midnight, the fireworks went off, but it wasn't much of a show. Ever inventive, Fred Morath took a shovelful of hot coals from the stove, strategically placed them on a pile of railroad ties, and as soon as you could say Happy New Year, the 5 men whooped and hollered around a spectacular bonfire. It was so spectacular that people down in Colorado Springs thought for sure the summit house was burning down, with the 5 climbers inside. The blaze was even seen in Denver. Upon their return the next day, the 5 climbers set facts straight with police and fire officials and assured everyone that the stone summit house was intact. Welcome, 1923. These same climbers had been up on Pikes Peak during New Year's before, but without the spectacular show. So it was already something of a tradition when Fred Morath proposed in March 1923 that they make the Climb and Fireworks Show an annual event. He suggested that the club could be perpetuated by adding one good man every year, and Fred Morath also suggested the name and the stylized way of printing it. The AdAmAn Club was officially born. In early years, the climbing party was small, and the selection of new members quite practical. John Garrett, the number 2 addition to the club, was the local fireworks wholesaler. Members ranged from Colorado to Greenland to Antarctica. Noted explorer Roald Amundsen became an honorary member in 1926, although he never made the climb. Richard Byrd was named an honorary member in 1933, and Sir Edmund Hillary in 1972. AdAmAn members have been on the summit and fired off some kind of fireworks display every year since 1922. The first climbers made it to the top by way of the Cog Road, traveling the 9 miles in 6 to 8 hours. Members and guests would stay overnight at the summit house before returning the next day. Later, the group adopted a 2-day ascent, staying overnight at Bar Camp midway up the mountain, and descending immediately after the fireworks show to awaiting automobiles at Glen Cove. Mules and burros were used at various times to help carry equipment to the top. One especially bitter year, the animals were brought inside the summit house so they wouldn't die from exposure. Being the animals that they were, their New Year's Eve contributions froze to the floor where they fell, and were there to greet people when the summit house was opened in spring. Animals have not been used above Bar Camp since. Fred Morath, one of the original Frozen 5 and the chief organizer at the early AdAmAn climbs, relived some of his memories during an interview in 1972.
Now, the thing the AdAmAn Club doesn't do today is to stay over on the summit of Pikes Peak and watch that sunrise on January 1st. The boys are in too big a hurry to get off the summit. One of the greatest features of our trip up there to me, as I look back 50 years, is the wonderful sunrise view. We were the first persons on the world's surface, I was going to say, to stand on top of a 14,000-foot peak, or Pikes Peak, and look down and watch the first New Year sunrise. And it is an immense sight to see that first sunrise of the New Year come right up over the eastern plains out there, and then start right down that Cog Road as fast as we could go. And sometimes it was pretty bad going down because the ice was slick. I have a photograph of the worst year we went, 1927. That was the year that we nearly had a casualty. 2 of us were blown off again going down that Cog Road, right off the edge, just slammed right down and knocked the wind out of a couple of us. But we got up and we made it down to Manitou, ran down in 2 hours and 20 minutes. And that was the only time that year I remembered I don't think I'll make another trip next year. Once in a while we would say that. Those first years were such hardships. I don't know how I happened to think about it, but the AdAmAn whistle has been forgotten about, but it's never lost over the first 10 years. It goes like this: one AdAmAn, the other AdAmAn. That's the AdAmAn whistle. We hear it down the street, you hear that whistle, you turn your head, a block away is Willis McGee giving the AdAmAn whistle. And now that is something that might be said, well, that's kid stuff. Well, maybe it was kid stuff, but it's a thing that still, men are kids anyway at heart, or they wouldn't be up on that hill. Here we got doctors, lawyers, physicians, bankers, clerks, merchantmen, and attorneys, all up there on that mountain. It may be that they're tired of the trivialities of New Year's, and drinking parties and noise, and maybe they prefer the solitude of that trail because there's something that calls the men up there time and again, to go up on that trip.
Early morning sunshine promises a beautiful first day of the climb. as AdAmAn Club members, families, and climbing guests enjoy their last meal together for 1983. A few days ago, blizzards were the topic of discussion. Today, there's talk of a virtual heat wave, with temperatures expected to reach to the 40s. There's also talk of Sue Graham, the first woman ever to climb with the club. She's an accomplished hiker and mountain climber, and was selected like all the other guests on the climb by a vote of club members. The fact that a woman has broken an all-male tradition gets a good deal of press attention, but the climbers don't particularly notice or care.
Let's go up the trailhead, huh?
For the two-day walk up Pikes Peak, each of the 30 climbers carries about 40 pounds of equipment: sleeping bag, warm clothing, cook stove, food, and other basics. They must each be prepared for extreme cold, rain, or any other kind of weather that might come your way.
See you later. See you next year.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good idea.
A brief send-off from family members, a few quick pictures, and the AdAmAn climb is underway.
Bye, Daddy. Bye, Daddy.
Today, the group ascends along the Bar Trail, a twisting 14-mile route to the 14,110-foot summit. Normally, it's not a difficult climb. Families often hike the Bar Trail in summer, and the Pikes Peak Marathon is run along the trail every August. But with more than 4 feet of snow in some places, climbing becomes much more than a challenge. Stepping off the beaten path can plunge a hiker waist-deep in snow, and snowdrifts are treated with great respect. Traditionally, the newest member of the club is honored by leading much of the climb. This year, it's Bill Lindeman of Colorado Springs who leads the 30 others up the trail. His father and brother follow back in the pack. Slowly, surely, the group plods upward. They're blessed with the best weather in over 2 weeks, and down coats give way to T-shirts.
But warmer than you are.
Oh, I doubt that. We're sweating up here.
Are you really? About how warm is it?
Oh, I think it must be pretty close to 40.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Of course, experienced hikers know that mountain weather has a nasty tendency to change for the worse very quickly. Many of the climbers are concerned about the weather for tomorrow's fireworks show.
They're forecasting snow for tomorrow night.
Are they?
I was wondering whether or not they'd be able to see the fireworks down in the springs or not.
You never know until the time, midnight, then you'll know. Prior to that, you can be out there at 11 o'clock and be clear, at midnight, all socked in. Just depends on the year.
Set them off, whether it's clear or not, or?
We always try some, and if nobody can see them, we hang it up.
No official records have been kept, but older AdAmAn climbers say the chances of seeing the fireworks any given year are about 50-50. The climbers continue upward, staying in a close, tight group along the lower parts of the trail. However, one climber seems to be making his own route, veering off the trail at times, rushing ahead of the group, and sometimes lagging behind. This is Jim Bates' 30th climb with the AdAmAn Club. He's a professional photographer and club historian. And sometimes it seems like he's out here working instead of enjoying the climb. Bates has seen tremendous changes since he became a member in 1954. Yet for him, all the climbs share one common element: fun.
Well, it's been one of the most important parts of my life. I have enjoyed it, I think, more than any other one thing I've ever done. When I first started, we used nothing but Army surplus material. We had very primitive type of equipment to work with altogether. We had maybe 16 or 17 people climbing. That was the number. We couldn't have hired anyone else to go with us because that was the only number of people that were interested in going. But over the period of years, the club has gained popularity with the advent of good cold weather gear. You can see over a period of years how this has all changed and it has modernized.
Well, it was warm. It's ceasing to be that way pretty quickly. There's a small breeze coming up. The sun's getting lost in the clouds, and I suspect we'll be putting some shirts and coats on soon.
Okay, well, you take care. We'll talk to you in just a little bit. Din Assembly will be talking to you after 2 o'clock.
Thank you very much.
Since 1925, radio communication has been an integral part of the AdAmAn climb. Joe Rohr, an early genius of radio, became the voice of the AdAmAn Club as he gave the city and even the world an on-the-spot account of the climb as it happened.
I don't suppose you actually chew and swallow aspen bark, do you?
Well, we could try some if you want.
High fiber fella.
Elk could do.
every time you think of the climb, you picture this mileage sign right after that piece of geography, and it's actually a half-mile away. Distances get real tricky a year later. This last half mile is a killer every time.
About 3 o'clock, the AdAmAn Club reaches Bar Camp, where they'll stay in relative comfort for the night. Bar Camp is maintained year-round as a hotel in the woods, about halfway up the Bar Trail to the summit. For the climbers, it's a bit of heaven, a place to shed backpacks and warm up around a stove and a cup of hot tea. Temperatures this evening will drop to below zero, average for almost 10,000 feet. And after dinner, the group hikes about a mile north to AdAmAn Point. They kindle the traditional AdAmAn bonfire, signaling the town below that all is well. Tonight takes on a special meaning. The climbers hold a memorial service for Ed Calvert, a club member who had passed away during the year. It's a time for reflection, but also a time for rest and contemplation of the assault on the summit tomorrow. Bruce Summers has been on the AdAmAn climb 21 times. He'll make it to the top this year, too, but not by foot. Bruce is up early New Year's Eve day, preparing a feast for the climbers that he'll truck to the summit. His specialty is baked ham with a secret sauce, and he's serving it with homemade soup and a variety of foods and warm drinks for weary climbers. The AdAmAn Club also gets an early start, with not-so-good weather looming. The trail above Bar Camp is not so well traveled. The walking is more difficult. Through the dismal forest, scene of a large forest fire decades ago, and above timberline, blowing and drifting snow make the trail impossible to find, and the climbers have to make their own route across the steep, open face of Pikes Peak. Since 1953, AdAmAn climbers have hauled along signal mirrors, used to flash back and forth to people below in Colorado Springs. In years past, the climbers would sight hundreds of flashes before noon. Today, overcast skies limit the mirror signaling severely. The climbers push on to a summit obscured by clouds. At best, weather on top of Pikes Peak is unpredictable, from Arctic blizzard to blissful calm. Today, it's about average.
When you're there on the east face and it's chill factors 30 or 40 below, and we've had 100-mile-an-hour winds and 20 below, and it can get kind of severe. I don't know that you're into the tradition. You're into the getting to the top of the peak and surviving.
I've been along years when we had one or two members or guests not climbing strongly with flu or somehow not feeling well, and we've wound up leading them in the dark by Coleman lantern. But there was no question of that today. It was just a question of how long is it going to take, how tired will we be.
Well, at least we got a variety.
I was a little concerned about it, but I actually felt real good today and felt great all the way up. The last mile took its toll, the altitude, and everyone's tired, and the weather was getting all nasty. But other than that, I felt real good.
Hey, all right!
About 2:30, the climbers reach the summit. Cold, tired, but happy.
This is the fun part. The end.
Happy New Year's to you, too.
How was it?
Oh, it's been a nice walk.
Yeah.
All right, guys, here we are. Looking good, looking tough.
Yeah, you can blow our big
Feels grand, little and stuff on it.
Happy New Year! Motley looking crew if I ever saw one.
Yep.
This year's climb was very enjoyable. I think it was a happy climb. We all stayed together nicely on the trail, and this has a number of advantages. The people who are on the tail end of things don't get discouraged because they see climbers a mile, 2 miles up ahead and think I'll never get there and become discouraged. There's also an awful lot of camaraderie on the trail and sharing things and tomfoolery and everything, and you don't get that when you're strung out all over the mountain. So this was a particularly enjoyable climb as far as I was concerned.
Inside the summit house, they find a bit of warmth and a place to set up temporary camp for the afternoon. But before dinner and rest, the members and guests must set up the mortar cannons used to launch the fireworks hundreds of feet into the air. The heavy metal tubes are packed with sand inside steel boxes and aimed out towards Colorado Springs. The cloud cover appears to be breaking, and everyone keeps their fingers crossed that tonight will be clear. Much of their difficult work behind them now, the AdAmAn climbers retire to the warmth and companionship of the summit house. They'll talk, read, rest, decide the fate of a cardboard world, talk some more, and eat dinner. It's their own quiet party at 14,000 feet.
Oh, no. Against Great Britain?
It's kind of a one-purpose club, and our purpose is basically a good fellowship and a fun fireworks show. And so you can't talk a great deal about the meaningfulness. It's an historical, fun thing.
I thought it was an honor to be invited as a guest, and I think it's more of an honor to be a member, and I like contributing to that and keeping that going, and apparently other people feel the same way because it's still very much sought after.
If I had to make a characterization, I'd just say they're a bunch of fun-loving guys that enjoy doing this together.
The people who are members are people who enhance our camaraderie. Our toughest job most years is not climbing this mountain, but deciding whom we can invite along as guests. We have a waiting list twice as long as the facilities will accommodate, so we wind up having to send "gee, we're sorry" letters to too many people.
Sue Graham causes something of a stew at dinner time. She'd love to try some of the ham, thank you, but Sue's a vegetarian. Shortly before 9 p.m., everyone huddles outside. 5 shells are fired off to commemorate the original Frozen Five, who made the first AdAmAn climb 61 years before. It's also a test of whether or not those down below can see the show.
Okay, how'd it go? Okay?
Good.
Okay, I guess that's it for now. What people ordinarily do on New Year's Eve seemed to me rather canned and false, and I didn't like it. And this seemed to be a much more unique and genuine activity, and I wanted to be a part of it.
It's the kind of thing I'd prefer to do on New Year's rather than maybe having parties.
And if it weren't for a feeling that we were a kind of important part of what Colorado Springs is, even if it's just a for fun part, I think we might not have survived as a club. But it is fun, and it's traditional, and that counts a lot. That's very important.
1983 is rapidly coming to a halt as the climbers prepare for what is hoped to be a spectacular show. Packs are packed, boots are tied as the climbers ready themselves to make a quick retreat off the mountain. The plan is for a convoy of four-wheel drive vehicles to ferry the climbers down immediately after the show. But blowing snow can easily ruin the idea. Climbers must be prepared to wait at the top and be ready to hike back down. Tonight, though, the four-wheel drives arrive about 11:30. 1984 is just minutes away, and the AdAmAn Club is ready to welcome the new year with a blast.
Happy New Year!
We should be getting some response here.
Okay, let us know as soon as you see something or hear something.
The word from below is not good. The fireworks can't be seen. Rather than send $1,500 worth of explosives up for just 50 people, the members decide to cancel the show.
Tony, we made the decision we're going to go ahead and shut down the fireworks display for this year. Before we go off the air, we'd like
But it's certainly not a time for disappointment. To the AdAmAn Club, New Year's Eve is a time for celebration in their own unique way. As they leave the summit, they're all high in spirits, with new friendships, renewed spirit in the outdoors, and the promise of a new year ahead.
This is another hazard I hadn't planned on.